Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I wanted to share with you today a list of books set in Toronto, the largest city in Canada, which is located in the province of Ontario. And so I'm traveling to Toronto at the end of August and have selected some books from this list to read. It's something I really enjoy doing, creating a reading list of a place that I'm going to. And so I thought I would create a little TBR list for people here that you could start from if you're traveling to Toronto, or if you live in Canada and are interested in reading about Toronto. This is obviously not an exhaustive list in any way. There are many books set in that city. But what I was looking for here were ones that are specific to my taste, have a level of diversity around the types of people's lives that we are following, and also cover different time periods, different parts of history. There are also two, I just have my list down here if I'm looking down, I have two nonfiction books, the rest are all fiction. And I have some that I've already read, so I thought I would start with those ones and then talk you through the other ones on the list that I think are really interesting, and maybe some of these will make it onto your TBR someday. Okay, so in terms of the ones I've already read, I am rereading one of them right now. So some of these were on my August TBR video, so I won't go into too much detail about them. But The Robber Bride by Margaret Atwood is set in the 1990s and earlier, following the lives of three women who encounter another woman who makes their lives rather miserable. So it's a relationship book, and it's all set in Toronto. In particular, one of the characters in this novel live on Toronto Island, which is an island in Lake Ontario, and that part really stuck with me when I read this for the first time, and so I wanted to reread this before I went back to Toronto. So a really great novel that does feature parts of Toronto and gives you, I think, a vibe for that city in a certain way. Another one that I've already read is In the Skin of a Lion by Ondaatje. So this is a historical novel, and it is set early on in the history of Toronto. It's specifically following it in the 1920s and 30s, where the city is being created into what it is today. And one of the characters, I believe, is a bridge builder. And so you're kind of set in the 20s and 30s in Toronto, and the city as it's growing, as it's coming to life. I would be remiss if I did not mention The Diviners by Margaret Laurence, which is my favorite novel in this video. This novel is not exclusively set in Toronto. There is one section of the novel following the life of Mariah Gunn, who comes from a fictional town in Manitoba. She does live in Toronto for, I'm going to say, about a decade of her life, and it is mentioned in this book. So I wanted to include it here. She ends up, like the present day, the story is told kind of in present day and then facing backward from the 1970s, not 2025 present day. And in that part, she's also living in Ontario, but in a rural part of Ontario. So there is a section in here about Toronto, and this book also has a section in Vancouver. So I think if you were actually interested in reading a book that kind of showed you a lot of different parts of Canada and gave you a kind of feel for a lot of different cities and towns and the vibes of them, then I would definitely recommend The Diviners by Margaret Laurence. Okay, so those are the ones on the list. Oh, no, they're not. I also have, sorry, Unreconciled by Jesse Wente. Jesse Wente is an Indigenous author. He grew up in the city of Toronto in the 80s and 90s. And so this is a memoir, And you get a really interesting sense of Toronto through Jesse's eyes, through being Indigenous in Toronto and like what that was like. And then I think he also currently lives there and has worked there extensively for different places. So he's got, you get quite a sense of that city, I think, in Unreconciled for sure. Okay, so those are all the ones I have already read. In terms of the ones that are currently on my TBR that I am going to be reading later on this month, Drew Hayden Taylor is Cold. This is his novel Cold. This is set in Toronto. Drew Hayden Taylor is another Indigenous author, and he is also, I think he may be better known as a playwright, because I had never actually heard of him before I was researching books for this list, and I think that might have something to do with the fact that he is quite a well-known playwright and he writes less novels potentially, but he does have a lot out there. So I'm really glad that this search brought his name to me. And this is a novel it's a thriller, I believe, and it is about 4 people whose lives converge, kind of, they don't know each other, and all of a sudden they're thrown together and they all realize they are being pursued by something in the city. So very excited to get to this one soon. And then I also have David Chariandy's brother. David Chariandy grew up just outside of Toronto, I believe, in Scarborough. And I believe that this is set in Scarborough. It follows 2 young men as they are navigating growing up in a world that is systemically set up to keep them down, and how they overcome this, the challenges they have as they're coming of age in the Toronto area. So very excited to get to this one as well. Now I'm going to take you through the 2 nonfiction books other than the Unreconciled memoir. I'm going to take you through the 2 other nonfiction books on this list. One of them is Toronto's Lost Villages by Ron Brown. So I was planning to read this, but when I got it out from the library and flipped through it, I realized it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So I did read the introduction and the first chapter, but I'm not going to continue. But if you are interested in the history of a city based on its evolution, so going from, the kind of swampy, I think he even says a swampy waterfront of Lake Ontario to the largest city in Canada today, and a very diverse city, going from an area obviously that was inhabited by different Indigenous First Nations that is now this multicultural huge phenomena of a city, then I would say check this out. It actually goes into quite a bit of specific detail about different areas of the city, different streets, different sections, and what they used to be, the things that used to be there on those streets as it evolved. So if that's of interest to you, then I definitely would recommend checking this one out. And the other one, which I haven't been able to find, it wasn't at my library, and I'm kind of hoping that it might be sitting for me in a secondhand bookshop in Toronto when I'm there and I can pick it up, is called Along the Shore, Rediscovering Toronto's Waterfront Heritage by Jane Fairburn. So I think that, bodies of water is an area of interest that I have in general. And so when I saw this one, I thought it might be really interesting to read about, the waterfront, how it's evolved, the animals that live there, the ecosystems that are on the edge of the water. And it's of course also super important to learn about, the way climate change is affecting these things and the way that human development has affected the water systems that people tend to set up villages beside. So I thought that one sounded really, really interesting. Okay, so I've got 3 more novels to share with you that are set in Toronto. And they all come from different time periods that I thought would be really interesting and diverse to learn about. The first one's called After the Bloom by Leslie Shimotakahara. And this is a novel set, I believe, in present day, with a young or a middle-aged woman whose mother has kind of gone missing. and she is potentially dealing with some dementia, aging, and they are trying to find her when she kind of wandered off. And as the daughter is doing more research into her mother, she uncovers details about her mother's internment during the Second World War. So the Japanese community in Canada were put into internment camps during the Second World War after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, even though many of them were, born in Canada and had no, affiliation, with the Japanese government. They were put into these camps and considered to be dangerous. Their lands were seized, their lives were completely disrupted and shattered. So this book addresses that. And I have read about this topic before in another novel, but that novel was not set in Toronto in the modern day. So I'm really excited to eventually read this one. I think it'll be a really interesting perspective to get on the city itself. The next one is What We All Long For by Dionne Brand. I have not read any of Dionne Brand's novels yet, but I have read her nonfiction and really, really enjoyed her writing. So this novel is set in Toronto. It follows, I believe, 4 different young people who are coming of age in the city, and they're all from different backgrounds. We have a Vietnamese woman, Vietnamese Canadian woman, a Jamaican Canadian man, and some other different characters, and they all kind of interact and have struggles as they're coming of age, and all of those things are kind of linked and tied and woven into the neighborhoods and the parts of the city that they inhabit. So I'm really excited to I think this would be a really interesting read, and it would give a really multicultural perspective because, as I said, Toronto is a very multicultural city. Okay, next we have a Gen X / millennial writer named Zoe Whitall, and her novel is called Holding Still for as Long as Possible. Full disclosure, I actually went to high school with Zoe Whitall. She's 5 years older than me, maybe 4 years older than me. So we were both from the same town, which is kind of funny. And I still have yet to read any of her novels, which is my bad, and I hope to rectify soon. I do have one on my shelves, a different one. But this one, Holding Still for as Long as Possible, is set in Toronto, and it is about coming of age around SARS, around Hurricane Katrina. It is about, the kind of millennial coming of age dilemma in those early 2000s, and how that is affected, and it's set in a very specific part of Toronto called Parkdale. So I've never lived in Toronto, and I don't think I'm very familiar with the city, even though I've been there a couple of times. So I thought this one would be very specific to a specific outlook, a specific generation, and then a specific area of Toronto. And then next we have a novel that fits into a really specific niche of novels that I actually really enjoy, which is women's experiences in different time periods around feminist issues, around family issues, around motherhood, and being a woman in general. And this one's called The Torontonians by Phyllis Brett Young. And so this one is came out in, I believe, it was first published in 1960, and so it's exploring this very personal internal look at being a wife and mother in Toronto at this time, that kind of 50s mentality, like the perfect housewife, and those types of ideas are explored in this one. So another one that really, this is an area that I find fascinating to read about, and I'm very excited to get to this one eventually, but I don't believe it's at my library, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of searching if I really want to read it in the future. Okay, so that is my list for you. Please let me know if you decide to read any of these or add them to your TBR based on me chatting to you about them today. As I said, there's extensive lists of books set in Toronto, and if you are more interested in murder mysteries, thrillers, horror, memoir, there are a huge amount out there. I probably could have found at least 5 or 6 more from my own shelves. But again, I wanted to kind of curate this list based on my personal reading interests and also a level of diversity around authors and experiences and time periods that you can choose from. So that is the Toronto reading list, and I want to thank you very much for watching, and I will be back again soon with another video.